Raider IO.
This is just a classic dungeon for Legion, as far as Legion dungeons are concerned, of course. I mean, this has been around since day one. It was one of the first dungeons available in Alpha and Beta. People know this dungeon inside out, so there's certainly no excuse for this particular dungeon, like we may have had with Cathedral, which is less popular, that these players don't know these pools.
There are also so many places where you can mess up, too, and it's exciting to see how teams go about those areas. I remember watching this dungeon in basically the forerunner to this show, which was the TESPA Collegiate Dungeon Race, and just seeing teams really struggle on this dungeon. Yeah. Like there definitely are areas, even with knowing it well, that can come to bite you. But Teambigpull really masterfully taking that first pack of trash down, and now looking at Raider IO, they're using a lot of their DPS cooldowns right now to clear that trash on their way to the boss.
But I mean, we just had a death over on Teambigpull. But I mean, Raider.io masterfully as well. They pulled everything. They pulled that big dangerous dragon pull along with all that trash, making sure to CC one of those mobs. Now, the reason some of this trash is so hard is because there's just so many dangerous casts going out on the entire pod. It's not just about front-loading damage on the tank that you can heal through or the tank can CD through. It's everybody needs to move out with stuns, AoE damage, random bolts going out, random dots going out, mobs that heal, you have to interrupt them. So we'll keep an eye on that after Himdall, because there's a particularly dangerous pull coming up soon. Himdall himself, of course, doesn't die. He kind of phases and ends the fight at 10% because he is our buddy and we don't want to kill our friends. That's not very nice. Main mechanics to look out for, he does have a big tank frontal, so the tank must always make sure to point him away from the party. And on top of that, there we go, the bloodletting sweep. There's also this dancing blade that at range usually baits out, and of course, finally, as we saw, when he calls the dragons with his horn, they will come through these 3 lanes in random order, and players need to make sure to dodge them because it's quite a hefty amount of damage.
Yeah, and as they are moving through that boss right now, we can see that Teambigpull just got their pull going on here. And one of the nice things about Raider IO, you talk about them handling those the first amount of trash very nicely. They invested all of their cooldowns into it. You can see even the Boomkin there using like big 3-minute cooldowns, knowing that it wasn't as important to actually bring them to the boss fight if they could clear that first trash pool all at once. And still, they are getting really impressive damage done on this boss, and they're about to actually send him to that phase, make him their buddy again, and move on to that second boss.
I mean, this is just what Raider IO does so well, is they do these large pulls with the DK AoE grip, and they just have so much AoE damage front-loaded in this situation that, you know, the difference between the two teams right now is not that substantial. We're talking, you know, 35-ish% or so. But over the course of the dungeon, they pull 1 pack bigger every time. It starts to add up, and this is how they get such a dominant lead throughout the dungeon towards the end.
Yeah, it's also a big thing to note is how efficiently they use different things, like the way that they actually use the Boomkin's DPS, right? Like they say, okay, we're going to use the 3-minute. Like they are getting maximum usage out of cooldowns instead of just saving them for scenarios that they're really scared of, and they pull around that. They know that, okay, the cooldown's going to be up in 30 seconds, we'll do the big pull then. We are going to see the Teambigpull now is just about to finish, about 5% left on the boss, and Raider IO already up the stairs.
Yep, so Raider IO, exactly. Right after this trash pack, this is the next dangerous big pull, which I presume, which is why they're taking this one a bit slower. They're just going to pop all of their AoE damage on. We're now introduced to Mystics, which do heal the group and put healing down for both the players and the mobs. And we're also introduced to Rune Carvers, which do a ton of damage on top of the champions that we've seen before that do a ton of tank damage. So I'm expecting to see massive damage coming in, as we see, of course, the Rogue and the Warrior just increasing so quickly on the DPS. And yep, the pack's gone. There we go. I didn't even finish my sentence and it's dead.
Yeah, they really make that look pretty easy. And one of the things to note is you don't see quite as much damage coming out from that Balance Druid, but that means that we still do have that cooldown. So if they want to do another big pull, if they want to use that on the boss, it should be up by now, only being a 3-minute cooldown. Now Teambigpull is starting to do the same thing. They're taking this relatively slow on the steps, but they actually lose the Warrior here, Sloot.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of sloppiness coming from Teambigpull just on this trash. I mean, it is really dangerous trash, and don't forget that we do have Raging as an affix right now. Again, just a reminder, that means mobs below 30% health do 100% increased damage, and I mentioned it before, what's so dangerous about this trash is that there's so much damage going on the entire party, aka non-tank members that just don't have the same survivability, and they could just easily get 1-shot or 2-shot by a combo.
Yeah, and some of the best ways to deal with that is to kind of do what Raider IO's do and just get everything down really quickly all at once. And then also if you can get those stun rotations going, that will also help quite a bit as well. Now Teambigpull starting to catch up just a little bit on Trash, about to move into this room, but this Stormforged Sentinel has just been going bonkers.
Yeah, these are kind of mini boss style mobs. They just have a ton of health, and at 30% health along with Raging at the moment, they also gain a shield where they absorb a ton of damage, so it's usually quite useful to have something like a Shaman Purge or an offensive Dispel from a Priest, of course neither of which team has, so they'll have to chew through a bit of extra health and just live so long. I mean, at this point, both teams have now moved through what are two of the most dangerous pulls, especially with Fortified through this dungeon. So, you know, the following packs aren't particularly inherently dangerous alone. Of course, they could always make them more dangerous just by mass pulling, just like, once again, classic Raider IO here. Just pull both packs together, AoE grip it, and just cleave it down.
Yep, and they do quite a bit of damage, and that we finally do see that Druid actually use some of its cooldowns there to do some additional damage. Now they're going to be able to pull these mini bosses, and the question is, are they going to be able to skip some of the Trash here?
I think so. I mean, you just saw them hug the side there, and it's pretty well known, even to the public that runs this dungeon frequently, that those three Trash monsters usually don't provide any percent for the dungeon. In fact, I'm not really sure why they're there entirely, but most groups do opt to skip it, which of course does mean you have to play a bit careful on the boss, because this next boss, Herja, does have punts that can move you across the room, the tank particularly, and if you get punted at the wrong angle in the wrong direction, well, then you're going to pull a bunch of Trash with the boss, and that could be lethal.
Yeah, it definitely could be. One of the nice things, though, with it being fortified is it could be a slightly more forgiving than if it was a tyrannical boss and you're just pulling a bunch of adds on top of it, but still, we will see the positioning from the tanks reflect the fact that they are trying to skip it. Teambigpull still trying to make their way over to this second boss.
I mean, they're just falling further and further behind. We'll see here in a moment, are they going to pull these next two pack together with an AU grip like Raider.io does? If they don't, that's just more time lost. It looks like they are on this particular one. I think, yep, okay, so they're going to grab those five together. They're going to cleave them down. I'm not, oh, the rogue goes so low for Teambigpull. So, I mean, they're just slowly trying to play catch-up, but Raider.io just does it so much better. Now, of course, the second boss does not spawn until these two mini-bosses are dead, and these two mini-bosses, in fact, actually do not benefit from Fortified or Tyrannical, so they are just mobs with a bunch of health, but they don't increase the percentage for health and damage that you see with the other Trash.
So just getting through that right now before they do pull the boss. If you were Teambigpull here, what would you try to do to catch up? Does it really just come down to getting bigger pulls in?
I would just do a big pull.
Just be you, Teambigpull, as the best way to get back in this one. Raider.io trying to get further ahead on their victory.
I mean, it's ironic. You know, we joke about it, the Teambigpull thing, but look at it right out the gates. What did Raider.io do? They pulled all of the Trash together, including the Dangerous Dragon pack, AoE gripped it, cleaved it down, AoE'd it down, done. Teambigpull did that in 2 pulls. I mean, it's just tons of time lost there.
And the cooldown rotation coming out of Raider.io is just really good as well. It's one of the reasons trying to highlight it. And, you know, you see them really leaning on their warrior and their rogue on certain pulls. Then the next pull, even though Boomkin damage isn't flashy, like, you actually look what it's doing on the meter, it is really impressive. And now we will have to see the cooldowns, like with the way that they pulled, that you saw like an incarnation coming out on the pool at the bottom of the steps before the boss, and they go through the mini boss.
Raider.io with the death. Oh, they do have the battle res. Okay, I didn't know if they had one.
Well, I was about to say that laser chicken was inside of its 3-minute cooldown.
Yeah,
right now it's about to be doing.
I knew they used the res earlier. Well, let's talk about this boss for a second. So, of course, this boss kind of has 2 sides of empowerment that she goes on relative to these Trash mobs you killed earlier. Another death down on Teambigpull in the meantime. Got to highlight the important stuff. People want to hear about deaths, not about boss mechanics, of course. So Teambigpull does have a death. It looks like they're not battle resing. I guess both battle reses are down at this point, unfortunately, because they have had 6 deaths. So now they're going to need to deal with those 2 mobs prior to the boss. And I guess the hunter does actually release, starts running back in the meantime, because these mobs, they have so much health that it's probably more efficient, unfortunately, to do that. So back to Herja right now. She does have 2 phases of empowerment, and this is why the tank likes to, or the group will ping-pong the boss between the 2 sides of either nature damage from that electricity, or they will go to the holy side, because she does do party damage that increases in damage the longer she's empowered on the side.
Yeah, and you can also see that the tank is trying to keep her as far as possible to this far side of the room. That is because, as Sloop mentioned earlier, that Trash is still up, and if you got a bad punt or something like that, you could actually pull those 3 little mobs towards the front of that room, so they're going to want to try to avoid them as much as possible because it's just not an efficient pull to be going at.
Yep. So we're going back to the nature electricity damage side. The boss does go down. What a shocking result. They're going to move around the side now, and in a moment we're going to be seeing Teambigpull only just now start on the boss when Raider.io is already starting to work their way over to Fenrir, which will be our third boss.
It definitely was a shocking finish, but with Raider.io, it really does seem to be within their nature to pull that off. Now, Teambigpull still needs to get going on this boss.
So I'm going to be interested to see how they pull around here, because there are two of those big sentinels that we mentioned earlier that have so much health that are still there at the door. You have to deal with those unless they invis pot through. And actually, to be honest, these days I don't even know if you can invis pot through. I remember back in my day, there were a lot of ways to kind of get by those, you know, death run through them, etc. So we'll see how they handle them, because Raider.io kind of already went to the side to do one mass pull on the side opposite of where those sentinels are, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Teambigpull, of course, in the meantime, dealing with Herja on the nature side. Here comes the punter on the tank. Over to the holy side we go. The players will follow, and they'll be ready to deal with that bouncing holy damage that will hit party members, and they'll have to use their CDs sparingly here.
A slight aside, but I do think overall in the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, somewhat interesting the lack of invis potions that we've actually seen. A lot of the teams opting into not using them, so they can. Wait, what scared you?
The road just probably.
I was like, look.
Also, the spider fell on my head.
What happened? So we can actually see the cheat death was procced on the rogue, and that's the punt that we were talking about. That need to make sure you're positioned in a good place so you don't pull the additional adds. Teambigpull doing some great damage though right now onto Herja. The rogue and this Marks Hunter looking great, and like. The warrior looks like he's behind on the damage meter, and he's already at like he's at 1.3 mil.
Yeah. So just to touch on what you said with the invis pots, a lot of teams try to avoid it where possible because it does incur a 10-minute CD on your potions, which is a ton of damage lost, you know, throughout the 10 minutes in the dungeon.
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to avoid, especially using it early on. Raider.io, of course, does go through the portal to go to this beautiful nature area where we will find Fenrir, the third boss, kind of having a nap on the right side in a moment. We'll see if they decide to skip this bull. They indeed do. Some teams usually pull it for a bit of percent, but of course, just killing one mob randomly in the middle of the instance is usually fairly inefficient.
Yeah, and Raider.io has definitely been a squad that we've seen a lot of efficiency out of, and a lot of the times they stay efficient by just doing really big pulls when they have cooldowns up. So right now, they're going to jump right in on Fenrir, and they're going to try to put this doggy down.
Yep, so, you know, Fenrir was just hanging out. He was just wolfing down a meal. They come over and try to DPS him down. He has it's a two-phase fight, but it's a bit weird because at 60%, he will leave the area, and you'll have to clear a bit more trash to re-access him, and he remains at 60% for the second phase. So they're doing a really good job here. I always comment on this about moving him in the direction of where they need to go. So in about 7% from now, he will immune and run off, and they're already in an excellent position to start pulling the trash towards him.
Yeah, we haven't seen too many of the teams do this as well. Of course, we haven't gotten to see that much of this dungeon either. And once again, man, Teambigpull, they're actually not having the best day.
No, I mean, it's just sloppiness. It's just a death here, a death there. I mean, this is going to cost them, especially when we see, you know, the global stage next week, but we'll get to that a bit later. So if you're careful here, you can thread some of these wolves. Now, there was one wolf pulled there. They do grip it in. I'm not sure if that was on purpose or not. The Miao Chan, the Holy Paladin, did get a bit close to the wolf. However, I did see a taunt immediately go up on it with a grip. Perhaps it was intentional, perhaps not. They do need percent nonetheless, so they will need to kill these down. Now, it's important to note that the groups will likely start going upstairs to the Kings after Fenrir when they're at around 15 to 16% remaining, because the Kings upstairs do give 15.8, 15.9%, something like that. So they don't need to get 100% prior to crossing that beautiful light bridge upstairs.
So Raider.io, this was the team going into this. Obviously, they were the first place seed, but when I was talking to the North American teams, they were all saying, like, this was the team they're scared of. And when we're watching them play right now, it is obvious why. And we are going to see a few of the ads on top of the boss right now, as Raider.io is going to mow them all down pretty easily. And it looks like they should be able to get Fenrir down before Teambigpull is even inside of the room.
So a couple of mechanics to watch out for here. This one especially, Scent of Blood. He will actually fixate a non-tank target and start hitting them and increase damage. So, but usually, especially, you know, if it's something like a rogue, if you have a personal CD, it helps a lot. A BOP, you know, Blessing of Protection works on them as well. Or something like a warrior tank intervening will help too. Nothing too bad to deal with. Fenrir will also cast his Unnerving Howl that summons 3 extra wolves that you just cleave down on top of the boss. And lastly, he does do an AoE cleave and also a leap, this Ravenous Leap that you want to spread out for, because every target he hits, he actually AoEs the area and applies a bleed. So if you're all stacked, you'll get multiple stacks of that bleed, and it could especially on Tyrannical, could get pretty out of hand to heal.
Yeah, speaking of things getting pretty out of hand, we are going to see Teambigpull just hit their 13th death mark. It looks like they had a full wipe over there. So they are falling very far behind right now. Raider.io kind of just racing against the clock right now to show what they can do.
Raider.io finishing off Fenrir, taking their food to go in a doggy bag, and they're going to go upstairs to the Kings in just a moment. Now, they still have 24% left, so they got to make up that 9-ish% somewhere soon. We'll see if it's back in the hall. Keep in mind, I do still think they have those 2 sentinels that we commented on the door leading to the bridge coming up. I think those give about 4.5% apiece, so that might be the missing link that they need.
And even though Raider.io seems to be exiting it, it is undeniable that Teambigpull is still in the doghouse.
They are. They are indeed. They're still dealing with the hallway trash right now. I mean, the benefit to what they're doing is that they will have more trash percentage going down to Fenrir at the moment, but they're just so behind right now. So they do indeed pull these 2 sentinels. They're likely going to kite them all the way up so that they can efficiently cleave them down along with starting the Kings upstairs, because those Kings mobs you can only summon, there's 4 of them, you choose the order in which you summon them, and you can only do 1 at a time and then the last 2 together. So you can't just pull all 4 of them at once, so it's more efficient to allow these sentinels to follow them upstairs, have them start the RP event, and then go from there.
And oh man, we are seeing Teambigpull. They're actually going to have another death here. They are just struggling against this trash, and we kind of haven't played up the fact that this trash. Well, wow, that's going to result in 3 deaths. But we haven't been playing up just how difficult this trash is. Like, this is a fortified key, so wipes like this can happen with raging as well. Yeah, and especially raging is difficult in this key in particular in Halls of Valor, because a lot of the trash actually has big health pools, so they're in that 30% range much longer, and that's going to result in a lot of damage. But you were talking about one of the biggest strengths about the pools that Bigpull has right now is they'll have slightly more trash when they actually go down. But look, Raider.io has the perfect amount of trash.
Another death for Teambigpull. I mean, at this point, you know, there should be consideration given to the fact that they probably had celebratory shots in Celebration that they've qualified in the top 2. So at this point, there might be a bit of sloppiness in
play. The only way to get through Cathedral. So.
exactly. So they might be slightly impaired while doing this dungeon. We don't know for sure. Either way, they are moving over to Fenrir, and in the meantime, Raider.io with a dominant performance upstairs, starting their next King.
Yeah, and they're just going to be able to cut through this very quickly. And wow, you can actually see Meowchan doing just a crazy amount of damage here. Really impressive coming out. And this is something that Jack was talking about quite a lot. Like, you can actually see really good damage come out of Holy Pallies.
Yeah, no, I mean, Holy Pallies are known for their burst for sure, and they're certainly outputting it here. I like what they're doing here. It's pretty common. Once you start the first King, you know, some orders are easier than others because each King has a specific ability, and once it's killed, the remaining Kings get that ability. So you have to carefully choose which one you want to kill first and how you want to buff the remaining ones, and it's pretty typical to do that left side one first and then the rightmost one. And you see how they're kind of slowly kiting him across so that by the time he dies, they're already triggering the next one.
And then once they do trigger those, it's going to be the next 2. They'll be able to finish those off, and then they will start onto Skovald. And it looks like they may even be able to pull Skovald before Bigpull gets Fenrir down. So that is how far that they are ahead at this point, and that isn't even including the additional 1 minute and 20 seconds that Bigpull has on the clock over Raider.io.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a massacre at this point. It's going to take a while for them to catch up. It's going to take an absolute miracle. Raider.io will need to wipe several times, go to the bathroom, go for lunch, come back, perhaps go to class, and then start this dungeon again for Bigpull in order for them to catch up. Now, this next pull actually is kind of dangerous for Raider.io. They have to deal with both Kings at the same time, and they both have the abilities of the prior 2 Kings. And keep in mind, they're considered trash, so they're fortified, and they're going to enrage at 30%.
And
a ton of damage going on Tarkham already.
I was about to say, it looked like the Warrior may just actually get deleted here, but Raider.io able to stabilize, and this is honestly, at this point, probably the hardest part of the dungeon, just based off of how Raging will interact. It looks like they are going to try to, yeah, look at just how much damage it can get out.
I mean, they have those random dagger throws on the non-tank target, and they also have the Severed debuff on the tank target, which makes them take 20% increased damage per stack, so it's going to get pretty out of hand. That Warrior getting so low
right now. Yeah, this Raging going to be able to put out a lot of damage. Once they get him down, they should be out out of the woods. And just like that, now they will only have one target. He's going to be raging in just about no time.
I like how they played it safer there to make sure that they kill the raging target first before pushing the other one to raging, just to make sure that the damage wasn't too overwhelming and they didn't get RNG'd in one of the melee, randomly got gibbed by a double enraged dagger.
That's really what you need to do with these two as well, because it's just like, it's not like it's only enraging for a little while. Like with that big beefy health pool, you're in 30% for quite some time. Big pool, on the other hand, they have finally gotten Fenrir down to 25% health. Let's see if they can manage to keep this going, sending them good vibes right now.
Yep, so there's a bit of RP coming up now, right before the fourth boss, Skovald, is aggroed. Of course, for any lore nerds out there, we do know that one of the pillars of eternity here, held by Odin, the Aegis, is what King Skovald is very keen on obtaining from you, and you'll have to kill him or he'll kill you in order to win it.
It's actually God King Skovald?
My mistake, yes. So the Aegis is what we're fighting for, but because of the RP, it actually takes Aegis for this encounter to start. I'm sorry, Richard. Are you okay? Apparently, I'll keep commenting at this point. So Teambigpull is now moving over. They have killed Fenrir. They'll be rushing upstairs right now. I believe they also have the 2 sentinels available at the door. They are about 5 or so % behind what they need to be prior to moving up to the Kings. Ragnarok, of course, one of the abilities that Skovald casts. One of the players will need to pick up that Aegis indeed and use their on-use ability to make sure that they're immune to the fire damage behind the shield.
Yeah, they're doing exactly that, so I guess they know how to do it.
Yeah, that's true, yes. After the shield is thrown away from the player after one absorb, King Skovald himself will actually pick up the shield, start the same channel, but also as a result of his channel spawn these 3 Flame of Woe fire elemental adds that will leave green patches on the ground that do a ton of damage, stacking if you stand in them. It's important to keep them together and cleave them down. You saw the DK as well kind of gripping one closer and closer just to make sure the melee had access to them to cleave them. No problem there, after which the tank needs to make sure they run over and pick up the Aegis again to make sure they're ready for the next Ragnarok, which is at 100 energy on the boss.
Yeah, and once again, they're really starting, they just use the Balance Druid to fill gaps. The second that the ads come out, you can see using the big damage cooldown at their disposal to get the cleave going, and all of a sudden you actually do see Gutty jump up onto the meter, and now they're just seconds away from actually taking down the God King. And Teambigpull finally getting up the bridge, and they're going to have to go through all of those kings before they can even pull the God King. So it should just be a few seconds before Raider IO gets the God King down and gets to start working onto Odin.
Yep, so there's no more trash left. They're at 100% already. So after this, Odin, just like you said, jumps down and he's ready for combat in a moment. King Skovald indeed going down while Teambigpull is still running up to start their king rotation in the first place. Once again, bit of RP coming up now. Odin's going to yammer on about loving things and hating things, and momentarily they're going to start on Odin, who, similar to Helia, you don't actually 100 to 0. Rather, he starts at 100% HP and you need to get down to about 80.5 prior to finishing the encounter.
Yeah, and Teambigpull, I really want to see how they do right now when they actually get to the double pull here, because like we've seen so many missteps. Let's see how they actually take care of the raging, see if they can regain a little bit. I mean, they do already have 18 deaths here in the face of Raider IOs, but 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what Rob mentioned earlier. It could be just a psychology thing, they just might be taking it easy, not too much pressure on their end. But I mean, certainly just the difference in performance here is staggering, and it seems like Raider.io is really here to send a message that they're the best and they're going to win this whole thing. So we do start off with Odin, very similar encounter to the raid design as well, which of course came after the party design, the dungeon design. He will spawn random spears that do shoot those light orbs out. Players need to avoid them so they don't take AoE damage and get stunned. And he will also AoE grip all the players to him after casting this large AoE that will usually one-shot players inside. So you got to make sure to run out right away, which is a bit tougher for classes like DKs, especially if they use the Wraith Walk on something else earlier.
Yeah, you really need to be preserving a lot of those options that you do have for mobility in your toolkit for that, because it is a big effect. So running out of it can take quite some time, and if you don't have a mobile cooldown, it's going to be a problem. Then after that, you see the runes do go out. All the players need to actually go to the corresponding rune that's put over their head to make sure that they get this buff.
It's usually quite tough for me. I was the kid in class that usually put the circle block in the triangle hole. Never worked out so well for me, but nonetheless, they do match up all the shapes properly and the colors. Spears come out at increasing levels throughout the fight. You can see spawning 3 of them now based on his percentage. They do indeed finish the encounter off, and that should dominant victory from Raider.io to take that top seed.
That was quite a dominant victory as well. Even someone who didn't know how to put the circles into the circle holes and the triangles into the triangle holes can see that.
Holes are tough.
Yeah, congratulations to Raider.io. That was a performance I wanted to see right there. I said I wanted one game there where it was just start to finish dominance, and they did exactly that. And we're seeing Teambigpull still try to get through it. And yeah, at this point, I don't want to be overly speculative. Obviously, we're going to see more of them next week, but yeah.